Shalom WJC family. This week in Shul we'll read Parshat Vayikra, but it is also what is called Shabbat Zachor, the Shabbat that immediately precedes Purim. We always call Shabbat Zachor, and we read a passage for the final reading, the maftir reading in Shul, from Devarim, from Deuteronomy. Now, that does not always fall on the week that we read Vayikra, the beginning of this new book of the Torah called Torah Kohanim, the sort of Torah of the priesthood. But because it does, I want to comment on that confluence. But first, I want to help us understand Shabbat Zachor a little better. This passage in Deuteronomy that we'll read says, Zachor et asher asa lecha Amalek. Remember what Amalek did to you when they attacked your rear, where all the weak and the enfeebled were, as you marched out of Egypt. And God delivered them into your hands. And when you are in your country later, when you're back in Israel and God has given you the land and you are free from all your enemies, you have to wipe out the remembrance of Amalek from under the heaven. Lo tishkach, don't forget. It's a very complicated idea that we're supposed to wipe out their memory and also not forget. So what's happening here? Well, there's a traditional interpretation, Ibn Ezra's interpretation, and even the one found in the Bible, is that this is a command to completely wipe out the people of Amalek. And that is what King Saul is supposed to do in the book of Samuel. Ibn Ezra, the medieval commentator, makes this connection. And King Saul's unwillingness to actually kill every last man, woman, and child in Amalek is part of his punishment. Part of why he gets the punishment of losing the kingship. It's very, very difficult passages to understand. More difficult for us today is that these passages get interpreted through the Middle Ages. Amalek creeps. The reason we read it before Purim, so this is still back in biblical times, is because Haman is a descendant of Amalek. And then in the Middle Ages, when anti-Semitism is rabid, tearing through Europe, interpreters start to sort of say that all anti-Semites are spiritual Amalek, not to be trusted, and ultimately attacking our enfeebled enfeebled. This has become problematic as a tradition as you bring us to today, when we have an empowered Jewish nation, and people, those who are critics, maybe anti-Semites themselves, accuse Israel of still trying to carry out this edict to wipe out entire peoples. But it's not so, and there's no biblical, that is not in fact what the Torah is telling us to do. The tradition is troubling in and of itself, even concerning the actual historical people of Amalek. But rather than go into that, I want to help us understand a way to deal with Amalek that is more constructive, what this might have for us to know. It starts with an interpretation of Rashi, of this question of who are these the enfeebled who were behind you. And Rashi says that those who were enfeebled behind you because of their sins, and therefore the clouds of glory did not protect them, right? How could Amalek even touch the Jewish people coming out of Egypt? God had this cloud of glory that was supposed to protect them. So Rashi says, how are these enfeebled even in danger? And he says it's because they were not following the Torah that they had already gotten. Sure, we hadn't yet gotten the whole Torah on Sinai, but we already knew we were supposed to keep Shabbat and we were supposed to do certain things. And so, for the Passover and whatnot, for the Passover sacrifice, and these were the ones who weren't following, at least not with a whole heart. And so they were vulnerable. So what do we do with that information? Okay. So are we victim blaming here? Maybe, but this is self-reflection, so it's okay. So this Rashi leads a much later commentator, a Hasidic commentator, the Kedushat Levi, to make the following very powerful and very beautiful, I think, interpretation of Amalek. Right, so this is Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Miberdichev in his commentary on Purim. He says, not only are the Jews commanded to wipe out Amalek, right? So there is this sense of outward looking and what we're supposed to do with Amalek, but each Jew has to wipe out that negative part in him that is called Amalek, hidden in his or her heart. So long as the descendants of Amalek are in the world, and each of us is also a small world, right? It's a Hasidic concept that the person is called either the small world or the small city. As long as Amalek is in the world, in us, so when the power of evil in each of us arises, that which leads us to sin, Amalek is still in the world. Then the reminder to wipe out Amalek calls out from the Torah. Right? The Kedushat Levi is saying this is not a historical commandment for us anymore. Amalek, anti-Semitism is an issue in and of itself. And the way to deal with it is probably not. And by the way, Kedushat Levi knew this. Levi Yitzchak knew this as well as anyone. The Hasidim in Tsarist Russia were under terrible pressure. They were being in prison. There were pogroms. There were a horrible time. Because the way to fight anti-Semitism is not through lashing out, but in fact to search within. Right? This has nothing to do with the war in Israel and Gaza. That's a war about nations, not a war about anti-Semitism. Right? This has a lot to do, however, with the rise in anti-Semitism around the world and how Jews are being treated. How do we deal with that? Are all those anti-Semites Amalek and our job is just to wipe them out? Of course not. Of course not. It's a terrible thing. It has nothing to do with any form of Judaism, I think, that any of us have learned in millennia. No. The idea is something different. The idea is to look for the Amalek in our hearts. Why are we enfeebled? Why are we so easily victimized by others who seek to harm us? It's because we do not have the fortitude of our tradition. We do not have the fortitude of our peoplehood. Are we doing enough? Forget before October 7th, before the current rise of anti-Semitism. Why are we so vulnerable all of a sudden to this anti-Semitism? Might it be that we are no longer keeping our traditions the way we once did? Might it be that we are not making mitzvot the primary part of our lives in how to live, to behave in the way in the world that God wants us to behave? Might it be that we are not supporting each other with a sense of peoplehood, Jewish peoplehood first, before our other loyalties, whether that be to nation or political party or special interest or cause? Maybe it's time to start focusing inward, to find that Amalek that is in our hearts, that is in the heart of the Jewish people at this moment, to find again our unity, to find again our purpose. And that, my friends, is perhaps why this coincides with Parshat Vayikra, why it is so appropriate this year that it coincides with Parshat Vayikra, because that is Torah Kohanim. We are to be a nation of priests and a holy nation. The reminder is to us that in order to blot out the Amalek that is within, in order to find our way forward, particularly at this difficult time, the answer is to be a nation of priests, right? To follow this Torah Kohanim, to bring this Torah of being holy, bringing holiness into the world, being representatives of that which is good into the world. That is what we need to be doing. I know there's a great urge to only look within and circle the wagons and say, Jews just need to take care of each other right now. We need to take care of the state of Israel right now. All of that's so important. But we also need to be going out into the world and doing our good, positive acts and following the Torah, not to convince others that Jews are useful, but to remind us who we are and our purpose in the world. Otherwise, what is it all for? Otherwise, the Amalek in our heart is the one that takes over the whole world, the whole person, the whole Jewish people. And this Shabbat Zachor, let us remember not to let that happen. It is tempting at this moment to tishkach, to forget, but lo tishkach. We can't forget who we are and why we are here. And when we do, we will bring that beautiful Torah of holiness into the world, which is our task, and the effect, the power of Amalek will fall away from our hearts, and Chalavai fall away in the world, and we will all be able to move forward together, bringing the beautiful teachings of our Torah, the beautiful practices of our people into the world again for a positive, better world for all. Happy Purim. Shabbat Shalom.